Hey folks, welcome back to Mark Kelly Farm. It's another windy day here in Nebraska, so we're doing some shop work. We're kind of half in, half out of the shop. So stick around. We've got a little project here with the tractor we're going to do. So recently at the farm auction we went to that we showed you here on a few videos ago, we bought an implement for my good friends Dave and Stephanie down in Tennessee. Well, they're coming up for a visit, going to bring us something and pick up this post hole digger that we got for them. But there's some stuff that the original owner did that I need to undo before they come and pick this thing up, and we'll show you what this stuff is. We're going to get this thing ready to go, and we'll tell you a little bit about these, how to hook them up, and how to use them as well. So these old farmhand post hole diggers were very popular back in the day. Everybody had one. You find these all over the place, or at least we do here. I have the exact same model out in the barn. So we picked this thing up at the auction for 85 bucks. They've fallen out of favor somewhat because the new skid steer augers go on the front of the tractor where you can see them a lot easier. They're easier to work. They're hydraulically driven. You can reverse them, and also you have power down. So this type of post hole digger is not as popular anymore, and a lot of people are letting them go. Now, they work really well. There was a reason why they were so popular, and if you've got some post holes to dig, this is a very economical way to do it. So the biggest problem with a 3-point post hole digger is there's no power down on 90% of your 3-point hydraulics. There's only power up. So with these post hole diggers, if it's dead of summer and you've got rock hard ground, you're going to have a hard time drilling a post hole. These work much better in the spring or after a rain when the soil is looser. It bores right into the ground with no problem. We'll cover hooking this thing up here in a minute, but we're going to get our fixes and our changes done first. Now this thing on the end out here had this big monster piece of metal welded on here that didn't belong. My guess, it was to add some weight out on the end to help put this thing down in the ground, but it's not necessary, and we cut this big ugly thing off and we sanded it up real nice. We'll end up painting this thing before we're done, so it'll look a lot better. So the next thing I want to do is the bottom 2 points of the 3-point. Whoever had this before must have had a category 2 tractor, because they have the category 2 pins out. And this type of post hole digger has flip-flop pins. You can pull these pins out, turn them over, and then you got category 1 pins. So we're going to do that first. I'm going to remove this yoke. I hooked it up to the tractor here just so it's not flopping around. So we'll get that off and we'll get those fixed. Got our yoke off the tractor. It's really easy. You just pull this pin that holds it on. This thing swivels on the tractor because it has to. So these are the pins in question. These are category 2 pins. We had to heat the sockets up with a torch to get these pins out. They were seized into the sockets. And in here they had a roll pin that you just punch out, but the roll pins were pretty much seized in there also. So we had to blow the roll pins out with a torch. So we're going to put bolts back in those. So after we got all that done, you can get the pins out, and you can see it's got the category 1 pin on the other side. So all you do is turn it around. We've cleaned them up on the wire wheel, and then shove them back into where this hole lines up again. And then we're just going to put bolts in here instead of those roll pins. So that'll change us back to a category 1 pin, and we'll do it to the other side as well. We've also had to loosen that one up with a torch, cleaned it all up, and then that goes back in. Now, the other thing that I've seen that the previous owner did, being he had this on a Cat 2 tractor, He cut these off and moved them out because the category 2, you need this to be wider. Whereas the category 1, like our tractor, this starts rubbing the tire because it's so wide. So that's an issue. So you can see over here on this side where it was previously cut off, and they moved it out because this part here used to be over here. And I'm assuming they added these pieces of pipe here to stabilize this back side because they were so far out. So once we get this cut off, because that's what we're going to do, we'll burn this off here again. We may cut these back off or just leave them on. We'll take a look and see how much they're messed up in here. We might just leave them on, just move them over. So that's the next operation. I'm going to go ahead and take these pins back out. We're going to burn both sides of these off, move these back in where they're supposed to be, and then re-weld those back on. We got them cut off and cleaned up, and as you can see, we took the extension off, made it back to original. Now when they're original, the center pins stick through just a little bit, so if you have that same issue to where they kind of get seized in there, you can kind of tap the back of this with a hammer to bust it loose. But we're ready to weld this up. We'll get it tacked into place. We want about 27 inches from this point here to this point here, and that'll put it just about right on our 3-point out there on the tractor. So it's not super critical that these are perfectly straight this way, because the lower links on the 3-point have those wobbly inserts in them. So if these weren't perfectly straight, you wouldn't have an issue, but I'm using a piece of heavy angle here just to keep things in line. And we'll get them tacked in, then we can lose the angle and weld them up. All right, we did a real nice root pass first, and then we came through with our good hot cover pass. Now some people would think that MIG welder is not heavy enough to do this kind of welding, but the welder I got, when it took to 220, will weld up to 3/8 inch steel, and we're welding less than that here. So we will be fine. That is not going anywhere, and it looks good back to normal. So we'll go install this back on the tractor. Got our yoke put back on the tractor, got hooked back up. Now let's talk about hooking these things up, because it can be a little bit tricky. So what you're going to do is, if you have a quick hitch, you got to take your quick hitch off, which we did. You also have to remove your top link, because you don't need that with this implement. And then after you get that done, lower your 3-point arms all the way to the ground, all the way down, so they're out of the way of this pin, because if you don't, this pin will not slide out. It'll hit the arm there. Or you could put the 3-point all the way up as well, as long as you're not connected down here. This has to be loose. So once you get the pin out, you need to go in your bottom hole. There's 3 holes here. Put it in the bottom, because if you put it in the top, when you raise the implement, it binds up here. So it's got to go in that bottom hole. So when I store mine, I store it in this position right here. I just let these right down on the ground. If you get your PTO shaft in the right orientation, it'll just fold down just fine. And then first thing I do is disconnect the bottom when I'm taking it off, and then that lets this float free. And then this arm here is light enough where you can pick it up and pull this pin, and then once you drive the tractor away, this will go down and sit on the ground, and that's a good way to store it. And then when you hook it up, you just back up, pick this up, put your pin up here first, your top arm, connect it, and then this thing swivels around. It's a lot easier to connect. Your 3-point arms you can just pick up. There's no pressure or anything in them. You can pick them right up. You can't always put them down, but you can pick them up at any time. And just throw your pins in, and then you would eventually connect your PTO. We'll show you how to do that here in a second. Now the next thing I want to do, see this little point here on the bottom of the auger, it's removable, and the threads on it are kind of stripped, and we don't want to lose that down in a hole if we're digging or anything like that, because they're probably not easily replaced. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick this thing up. I'll back into the shop a little ways. I'm going to put a couple stitch welds where that thing connects just to keep it on. And chances are this thing's never going to have to be replaced. If it does, just take a little cut-off wheel, cut those 2 stitch welds, and it'll come right back off. So we'll get that done. Now the next issue we ran into is the original PTO coupler. The splined end that attaches to the tractor on the PTO shaft would only go about halfway on, and then it would get stuck. So I filed and sanded and filed and sanded on the inside of the coupler to loosen it up to where it would go all the way on, but it just couldn't get it to go. So what I did is I went downtown, bought a new 2 yokes and a cross, which is what this is, your U-joint here. But nobody in town had the correct yoke to go on this shaft. This shaft is 1 inch by 1 1/8. It's not square. It's actually kind of a rectangle, so it only goes in one direction. So what we did is we took our old PTO coupler, we'll show you that, put it in our bandsaw, and we cut the face of it off, so it left us a real good surface here. And then we welded it to this coupler. We had a really good area to weld around here. It's on there really nicely. And then we welded the inside also. So this will hold up real well. Now you're probably wondering why I just didn't replace the cross and only do this portion of the coupler. Well, this cross is different than that cross, and even if I could find this cross, I could not get the bearing cups out of the yokes. They're seized in there. So like this one here, the one that actually goes on the PTO, I had to actually cut the part of the yoke off here to get these caps even off. So we just needed to replace the whole thing, so that's what we did. So we'll get this thing mounted up to the tractor now. Got her all hooked up, slid on real nicely. It's greased well, so we don't have to grease that. We've already greased this top one here. Now one thing, if you're ever making a repair like this where you got to weld something on, you also want to make sure that your yokes are in line, so they're timed correctly. So you see this yoke here, the one that's on our square shaft, will be in the same orientation as this yoke up here, this one here. On a low speed environment like we're doing here, it's not terrible, but something that's going to turn at a higher speed, if they're not in the same orientation lined up, it won't be balanced and you'll get a shake. So always make sure that your yokes are timed correctly. All right, folks, I think we're ready to go out and dig some dirt. Been waiting for this for a while, so let's go do her. We're out here by the garden where it doesn't matter if we dig a hole or not. So whenever you're digging post holes, I recommend that it's a two-person job, because you need one person eyeballing the auger and the other person working the tractor. Because this does not come straight down, the further you dig in the ground, the more your auger is going to be off. So it's always good to have somebody watching, so you can give signals to the person on the tractor, either need to back up or go forward to keep this auger straight up and down. So let's kick it on and see what she does. Working good. So let's put some down, let it down, see if she'll dig for us. The ground should be fairly loose here still. Now as you're running these down, you don't want to just go full on down into the ground. You just want to go down a little bit, because if you put too much down pressure on this thing, the auger could auger itself into the ground without picking any dirt up, kind of like a screw, and then you won't be able to pick it back up. So it's at the full extent of the down portion that we've let it go. So I'm going to give it just a little bit more. So now it's digging some more. And then I'll always bring it up and get some dirt off of it, and then put it back down in the ground some more. Just little by little. It's okay, Ruby. So just bump it down little by little with your handle here. Just kind of tap it a little bit at a time. So we'll give it some more. And I'm just idling the tractor. We don't even have the throttle up. So pick it up and get some more dirt off of it. You can see it wiggles around a little bit, but that's fine. That's not going to hurt nothing. But just bump it up every now and then. Make sure it'll come up. You can go all the way down to the ground, deep as you want to go. And then I bring it up like that. Then you turn your PTO off and it'll stop. Be very cognizant around your PTO shaft. You don't want to go anywhere near it. These old ones don't have any guards on them. So you can see we got about a 3-foot deep hole there. That would work real well for a post. Now I'm going to idle this thing up and see if I can shake some of this dirt off. Didn't help much, but oh well. Alright folks, I would say this thing's ready to go to Tennessee. Working just great. Now on top of the gearbox here, there's an oil fill plug here. You can take this out and put gear oil in this gearbox. However, it's very common for this seal down here to go out. So when you put oil in, oil wants to run down and leak all over the place. So I'm not going to put oil in this thing right now. I'm going to let Dave take it home and put oil in it, because I don't want him driving this thing home and getting oil all over the back of his truck. Now if this seal does go out and it doesn't hold oil for very long, what you can do is just take the plug out and pump a bunch of grease out of a grease gun in there. Pack it fairly well with grease and everything will stay nice and lubricated. So I'm probably going to get the correct size bolt for this thing here. These augers are interchangeable, different size augers. And then we'll tighten these bolts up and we'll cut the excess off of those. And then just a matter of putting some paint on this thing and we'll be done. Alright, we got some Rust-Oleum John Deere yellow on her. We ran out of paint. We still got to paint up next to the tractor, but I'll paint that when I disconnect it. But it looks pretty good, works pretty good. So there you go folks, a post hole digger on the cheap. If you're not afraid to do a couple little fixes, you can get some really good smoking deals. And just remember, if a man made it, a man can fix it. So Dave and Steph, it's almost ready for you. We'll put this baby on a pallet so we can slide it right in your truck. Looking forward to you guys getting here. So until next time, stay safe, stay healthy. We love you guys. Come back and see us real soon here at Mark Kelly Farm. We got lots more to do, lots more shop projects, and a whole lot of gardening coming up. See ya.